Hey, yo, what's up to everybody out there? Welcome to another edition of the Roundtable Talk. I am your host, C Money. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about something, and I was just looking at this, and we're going to talk about TV versus today versus the past. Not only that, we're going to talk about several things around that with livelihood. I believe I probably did an episode about this a while back, thinking about this, but I was looking at one of the greatest um, kid shows in the 90s. Not one of the greatest, but one of the best kid shows in the 90s. And I was looking at their intro and I was looking at it. And of course, if you don't know what I'm talking about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, I was also looking at an interview that Walter Jones, who was the original Black Ranger. And when I saw this and I was seeing the intros, I say he was basically only on the TV show on the Power Rangers for about 2 seasons. I've seen him on several other shows. I've seen him on Moesha. I think I've seen him on The Parenthood. I've seen him in several other TV shows. And in an interview, he said he was about 26 when he did the Power Rangers because he was born in the late 1960s. And I was like, wow. And then it kind of dimed on me. And I had commented on one of the posts. I said, and I'm going to tell y'all what I was saying. Basically, a lot of these actors and actresses, they look young, but they are not young. If you recall, a lot of these actors, they appear to look young and they cast them as students in these TV shows and things like that, because if you know that a lot of these actors, they're not really teenagers. I don't know if you ever seen the there was an actor, her name is, I think, Tracy Viller, and I remember her. And if you don't know who she is, look her up. I remember in the mid '90s, she did a guest appearance on a TV show called Living Single, which was with Queen Latifah, Kim Fields, Kim Coles, Eric Alexander, and a bunch of cast members. And she appeared on an episode there as an adult. And then later on, a couple of years later, she was cast as a high school student on the hit TV show, The Steve Harvey Show. And I started putting two and two together as I got older. I'm like, she had to be in her 20s because she looks like she could be a teenager, but in certain. And then a lot of people don't understand that a lot of these teenagers, you know, they was probably 19, 20, 21 years old and still looking like teenagers, and they got cast as high school members, you know, or as high school students. I one of my favorite school TV shows, of course, if I've ever never told you, is Head of the Class. And if you go look at the now versus then, you'll see that not with them, but I'm talking about with a lot of people. If you saw TV shows now versus then, a lot of these actors was like 18, 19, 20 years old, and they was being cast as teenagers. They was being cast as teen. There was an interview with Kim Fields, who played, of course, on the hit TV show Living Single, and who also, as we know her from To the Effects of Life, she did an interview about she had to she they had to up her age because she was younger than what she was normally is. And I was like, oh, because she her age, I think she was like 8 or 9 years old, and they had to portray her as an 11, 12-year-old kid. A lot of these things is basically, and people be like, what? And I'm like, because it was a post, of course, with the Walter Jones, and people were shocked about it. No, of course, as kids, we don't think that they are in their 20s and 30s because we're like, oh, they cast a teenager to play on this show. But as you realize, a lot of these people that get cast as teenagers, they're actually an adult. You get a lot of these kids that you see in these TV shows, and they're walking around here as TV show characters. They're actually adults. They're actually in their 20s. And I comment and I say that's common in the entertainment industry because a lot of these actors can be in their 30s and they look like they in their teenage years, and they get cast as teenagers because they still look like teenagers. You know, if you know and remember, and a lot of people know this, um, Nickelodeon, Disney. When you turn 18, you're on the borderline of getting boop, because remember, a lot of the cast members from the Nickelodeon and Disney area of the 80s and 90s, they was, excuse me one second. A lot of the cast members, they're basically, a lot of the cast members was underage, was like teenagers. And it was a known fact, allegedly, that when you turn 18, you get the boot, because then you no longer need it. Now, you was probably still there at 18 and 19 years old, because there was a few um, actors from the Nickelodeon and Disney 90s and 2000 area that was still around in their early, was still around in their early adulthood, because they was probably a popular hit. Do you think Raven Simone was a teenager when she did That's So Raven? I think not. Raven Simone was probably, in her early adulthood when she did That's So Raven. Because remember, we all know her from the Cosby Show, and then we all know her from Hanging with Mr. Cooper and things like that. And when she did That's So Raven, that was in the mid 2000s. Of course, she probably was, you know, if she wasn't an adult, she was about to be. She was probably 18 and 19, and still to this day, you can now. And when I see her new series, the new series that they have, Raven's Home, you look at it as if I can't see her as a mother. I can still see her as that little That's So Raven Baxter walking around. So it gets to me that a lot of these people, it's hard for them to transition. It's hard for you to transition. That's why they say it's kind of hard for a lot of childhood stars to become success stories in the adulthood. Like Steve Urkel or Ashley Banks, or one of the Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. Who's the other sister? The other sisters from Full House, the Step by Step Kids. A lot of these people, when their success as childhood actors, but when they come into adulthood, it's very hard. Emmanuel Lewis, from Webster. The only reason why he can still pass as a kid is because he has a medical condition that he cannot grow. He is a short person, and he is a little person. In reality, we can't say midget or stuff like that because there's people, but he is a little person. And the same thing with Gary Coleman. If you could cut off Gary Coleman's facial hairs and stuff like that, Gary could probably still pass as a little kid because he's short. But because faces and stuff like that, you can tell. But at the same time, I look at it as if people was like, they go and say, I didn't know he was that old when they got cast as this person. Well, because they have, they say black don't crack. A lot of these people, they could be in their 30s and they look like they 18 years old. I remember when I was in high school, a lot of people say I looked older for my age. In a way, that was a compliment. In a way, that was a low blow, because when you in high school, you don't want to look like you in your 20s and 30s. You want to look like a teenager because, you want to look young and vibrant. And then as you get older, you start looking like your age, But then there was some people that said I do look younger for my age. But then at the same time, I always got, you look older for your age. And I'm like, I didn't take that as a low blow, or something like a bad thing, because that just means that I was mature, And then of course I've been told that I look older than my brother, and and I've gotten that several times, and I'm like, yeah, but he's the oldest one, and it's not because I can't say I lived a hard life, because I didn't live a hard life. It's just that we age differently. A lot of people age differently. So when these actors come out and say, yeah, I was this old when I did this show, and I'm like, I can believe that. Who's to say that Bud or Kelly Bundy from Married with Children was 19 and 20 years old, or 21 and 22 when they did this show? Who's to say the guys from Welcome Back Carter, like Lawrence Hilton Jacobs and John Travolta. Who's to say that they wasn't in their 20s when they did Welcome Back Carter? You know, we don't know these age ranges, and then we look at it, and then when they said, they were shocked because the Walter Jones story, and I was like, wow, you know, and I said I could see it, you know, and I actually looked it up. He was born in what, 1966, and I was like, wow, so he's 59 years old. So I said, okay, I can believe that, because back then TV shows had you believing that these 20-year-old stars are actually 18 and 19 years old. Even though a lot of these stars, they don't reveal their age in these shows. They just tell them that they're teenagers, but they don't reveal their age. But we all know that some of these childhood actors was actually past their prime. You may be portraying them as a 16 or 17-year-old child in this movie or in this TV show, but in reality, this person 30 years old. If you remember one of the Madea plays, and I forgot one of the Madea plays. Madea, played by Tyler Perry, had a girl that was in one of her plays portraying as a teenage girl, and Madea and Tyler Perry said she was actually in her 20s or her 30s, I believe. And I was like, she does look like she's a little girl, and needless to say, that's why they cast her, because she looked like a young person. I've seen people, and I had one person, and I was out at a location, and this girl was getting carded, and I think she was in her late 20s, early 30s, and she was like, I always still get carded, but I'm old enough to drink, and I still get carded when I buy alcohol because I look like a little teenager. And that's why a lot of these people got cast, because even in their 20s and 30s, they can still look like they're 18 and 19 years old, and they get the better roles. You know, you're not gonna cast somebody that looks old as, you know, old as Red Fox, or somebody that looks old as Donald Trump, or somebody that looks as old as, you know, Morgan Freeman or something like that. You know, you're gonna want somebody, they're in their 30s and they look like they could be in their teens, and you know, and I want to cast them. You know, so it's a kind of shocker. You know, let me know if you know of any cast members or any actors that you know that was portrayed as a teenager but was actually an adult, because there was a lot of them out there. You know, the Black Power Ranger was just one of them. There was a lot of actors who was in their early 20s and stuff like that, and they were still portraying themselves as teenagers in these TV shows, you know. And there was a lot of people that was portraying as, you know, college students and teenagers and stuff and all that. And now you can go back to a lot of these episodes, and a lot of these, you know, you can go to YouTube and look at the then versus now, you know, to see that these some of these people was actually in their 20s when they did these shows, and you was like, but I thought they was a teenager. Unless they was like the Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen twins, you know, they was kids, because they was babies when they first started the show, and they grew up, you know. By the time the show ended, they was practically teenagers, you know. But there are some actors that they was in their early 20s, when they was 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 or whatever, and they portrayed teenagers in these shows because they had that teenage look, you know. Now, I did see something about the cast Saved by the Bell. All of them was actually in their teens when they did the show, so that was actually a thing, you know. But if you go look at these then versus now videos on YouTube, and you know, you go, you know, and look up how old was this person when they did this show, it'll probably tell you. And some of them actually do documentaries that would tell you, like the Walter Jones from Power Rangers, say he was 26 when he did the show. Kim Fields, she was younger than her character's age. And they had and she said this is the reason why while she was skating in the first, I think, season or so of Facts of Life, because they had to make her look taller, and you know, they had to put her age as, you know, earlier, because she was younger than her character's age, you know. And then there's some shows that you wish people would grow up, because The Simpsons, by now Bart should have been, Lisa should have, by now with The Simpsons, Maggie should have been out of college by now. The Simpsons premiered in what, 1989? Bart is still in the fourth grade. Lisa is in the second or third, I believe, and Maggie is still a baby that can't talk. By now, Maggie should have been out of college, married with kids, and have a family. And I'm talking about Maggie, the youngest. But they still portraying Bart as this little kid that go to Springfield Elementary. He's in the fourth grade, and I think Lisa's in the second grade. Maggie is still a little baby. And it's the same thing with Family Guy. By now, Stewie should have been a mad scientist, because Stewie was always creating stuff. But we see Stewie as this little 1-year-old kid. Stewie should have been well in his 20s. But this is what they are portraying, and it's the same thing with a lot of these other TV shows, American Dad, King of the Hill, things like that. One of my favorite great shows, King of the Hill. A lot of these shows they're keeping, and I'm like, dude, the only thing that happened was, they did the Rugrats, and the Rugrats grew up and stuff like that, and all that. But there's a lot of shows, we were like, they should be grown up by now. But with a lot of these, going back to what I was saying with a lot of these TV shows, it's to where people are portraying teenagers as adults, I'm 25 years old, but I was a teenager cast on this TV show, and, I'm 18 years old, but I was portraying a 12-year-old in this TV show and things like that. So it's like, because of the way you look, because if you're 25 years old and you look like a 50-year-old Morgan Freeman, you're not going to get cast as a student in a TV show. You're probably going to get cast as the actual teacher or something like that. But if you got the young people's look, of course, a lot of these actors portray young people in these movies and TV shows because of their looks. Me, of course, I would never probably be passed as a teenager when I was in my early adulthood, because some people say I looked older for my age. Some people say I looked my age, but it all comes down to it. But what cast member or what person that you knew portrayed as a kid in a show what was actually an adult? Comment at the bottom of this page and let me know, because it kind of gets me in it kind of intrigues me how many actors actually did portray teenage characters in these TV shows and movies. And then I was done with the Power Rangers. After the set, I was looking at it, and there's a video on it. You can check it. The Power Rangers theme songs from 1994 all the way to 2017. When you saw how many cast members that have changed, and they started doing this Power Rangers Turbo, Power Rangers Fury, Power Rangers this, Power Rangers that, Power Rangers Space Invaders, Power Rangers this, Power Rangers, and I'm like, how many Power Rangers did they come up with? And I was so like, I say, I walked with the original Power Rangers. I didn't know after the second season that they started changing the cast members, because from what I saw, the Black Power Ranger, which was played by Walter Jones, left after the second season, and a few of the cast members started getting switched up, and then only one of the cast members came back in a later edition of Power Rangers. And I'm sitting up here like, I look at some of these cast members, they was only on these Power Rangers shows for like one season. How many cast members? And if you go look up Power Rangers, they're gonna have like 10 plus list of Power Ranger series. Power Ranger Turbo, Power Ranger Fury, Power Ranger this, Power Ranger that. And I'm like, how many Power Rangers you can make? And honestly, how many of those Power Rangers was actually teenagers? Because if you look at the original opener for the Power Ranger, it says grab a group of teenagers and give them powers. So the Power Rangers is supposed to be a group of teenagers that actually get superpowers to help save the world. But how many of those Power Rangers was actually teenagers? And then that's the thing that got me doing this episode. How many of these actors, when they portrayed these teenagers in these sitcoms, TV shows, and movie theaters, was actually teenagers? Or was they actually adults in these movies? Because you're looking at it as if when he came out with that when he came out and he was interviewed and he said, I'm 26 years old when I played Power Rangers, I was like, So now it got me thinking, and this will portray what made me want to do this episode. How many of these actors? There was two reasons why I wanted to do this episode. Number one was how many actors portrayed teenagers, but wasn't an adult. That was number one, and then number two, I was like, how many of these series that you were gonna dish out with different characters? Because Power Rangers have to be one of the only TV series that got switched up so much till it got bad. Because remember when they tried to do Saved by the Bell? Saved by the Bell had the original cast for like 5 seasons. Then, as Kelly and Jesse ended up leaving the show, and they brought in a girl, and that was between the movie and something didn't add right. Because I said, how are you graduating Jesse and Kelly, but later on in the shows, you had this girl come in. And the girl didn't even graduate from Bayside High. And then after the series, they tried to revive Saved by the Bell by doing Saved by the Bell the college years. Now that ended up failing because they put the show in the primetime slot. We all know Saved by the Bell was one of those Saturday morning shows, along with California Dreams, Hang Time, and a lot of the other Saturday morning shows where you got up in the morning, you got your cereal, and you watched, NBC, lineup of all of the teenage shows, and it was part of it. But they wanted to revive Saved by the Bell and make it into the college years. And then after that was a failed success, what ended up happening? They ended up recasting the whole Saved by the Bell cast, and they only kept 2 people, Mr. Belding and Screech, because Screech was a college student that worked as an assistant at Bayside High. But at the same time, when the cast members got changed, and they only had like 1 or 2 episodes that some of the original cast members came back, and I was like, yeah, I wasn't really a fan of the new cast, because they called it Saved by the Bell the new class. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch it and see how it is. It wasn't as good as the original, just like they tried to do with Saved by the Bell. I mean, with Head of the Class, because recently in 2020 they tried to do a new reboot of the Head of the Class, and only one person came back, which was Robin Gibbons' character, which was Darlene, because she had a son that actually went to the school. Now, I don't know what the school is, because remember in the last episode of the original Head of the Class series, the school was being slated to be demolished and another school was being built. Now, I've never seen the new version of Head of the Class because it's on HBO Max and I don't have HBO Max. But I'm sure that it has some type of ties to that. The school that her son goes to is probably the new school that was built after the old school got demolished. Now, a lot of this stuff I looked as if how many cast members of Head of the Class was adults portraying students, because they could have been 19, 20-year-old cast members portraying as students. And you, a lot of y'all probably don't be knowing this, but you got to Google this stuff, because a lot of these people who did these shows, and I've said this earlier, that they did these shows, it will amaze you that they was probably in their 30s portraying a 15-year-old or 16-year-old kid, and you be like, I didn't know he was that old, because most of the time when we see these characters that's getting portrayed by these actors, we're thinking they're 15, 16. They're no older than 18 or 19 years old portraying teenagers, because you're like, yeah, you're a teenager, but you probably you're 18 or 19 or 20 years old. You would have never thought you're 30 years old playing a 16-year-old character, and you'd be like, oh. Because, with Walter Jones, he said he was 26. Who's to say, yeah, he could have been 18, 19, maybe 20, but we didn't know he was almost pushing 30 by playing a character. And I'm like, and probably one of the reasons why a lot of these characters get pushed away, because you can only play a teenager in a sitcom for so long before somebody starts realizing you're not a teenager, you're a grown person. And now with technology and social media and smartphones and stuff, it's kind of hard for a lot of these people to play teenagers in an adulthood, because they could look at it as if he's playing a 16-year-old character on this show, but in reality, he's 30 years old. He's 25 years old. Like, I know, and it's kind of hard for that to do, because now you have to really get actually young actors to play these roles, because now people going to Google your name, and then they're going to see, you're 23 years old and you're supposed to be a 15-year-old kid on this TV show. That don't even look right, you know. So now it's kind of hard. But let me know what y'all think about this. Do y'all know about a lot of these characters? Do y'all, first of all, did y'all know that a lot of these, here's several questions I'm going to go with. First of all, did y'all know a lot of these characters played younger characters that, you know, they was in their adulthood playing younger characters? Did y'all know that? Number two, did you know any actor that did play a younger character and but they was in their adult, that played a teenage character but they was in their adult ages, you know? And then number three, was you shocked to find out that a lot of these characters was played by older adults in these movies and sitcoms? Because, you know, it didn't really shock me because I know there was a lot of characters, even in movie theaters, even in movies, a lot of these people portray, just like they said, I'm going to give you an example, The Golden Girls. We all know that was one of the greatest sitcoms of the late 80s, early 90s. A lot of people don't know that Sophia, that was played by the late great Estelle Getty, was actually younger than all of the other girls, than Blanche, Dorothy, and Rose. She was the youngest in real life. But they made her look older on the TV show, but in reality, she was younger than all of them. And I know a lot of y'all was probably saying, what? And I'm like, yeah. They made her look young, and they made her look older in the TV show because she played Dorothy's mother on the TV show Golden Girls. But in reality, she was the youngest out of all of them. Maybe by a year or two, depending on how old everybody was. Because apparently all of them was basically in their 50s when they, and on the show, they was appearing to be in their 50s on the show. But in reality, she was the youngest out of all of them, and I was like, wow. And that is that because she was, but they was portraying her to be an older person. Now there were several TV shows that was like that, where a lot of these actors that was younger than their character's age had to play an older character, you know, and they had to make them look older. But it's more common for a lot of actors to play younger roles than their actual age. It's not common for a lot of actors to play older characters, even though it happens, but it was more common for an actor to play a younger character's age than it was for them to play an older character's age, because a lot of these actors, they was in their 20s playing teenagers on TV shows and movies because they had that young look and they was giving people what they thought they was. But now you can't fool the people because now you have Google search and social media and all this, to where you can find out their real age. I'm like, yeah, you ain't 16 years old. We all know you 30 years old in real life and you married with kids, but you playing a 16-year-old in this TV show. Nah, baby, something got to give. But let me know what y'all think about this. Comment at the bottom of the page. You can also email me, roundtable305@yahoo.com. I want to know what y'all think about this, you know, comment, post, and everything. So let me know. And as always, thank you for watching this show. As always, stay safe, stay blessed, stay hydrated. And of course, I will see you in the next episode. Take care.